All right, so tonight's program, like I said, is an exciting one. It is quite different than the ones I've done here previously. I've done our basic presentations on creation versus evolution and the ways that evolution is totally proven false by the animal world. And that's because I'm a naturalist. For those of you who don't know or have never been to one of my programs before, I study nature, I study animals and the ways that they interact. And we're doing this by traveling. We're on the road for usually 6 months of the year. And so that's when I'm out there doing my job of looking for animals. And I look for the animals which are the weird ones, the animals that don't like to be found, the ones that are tucked in nooks and crannies that most people will never have a chance to see. And so those are the ones I specialize in, and my wife is the photographer. And so tonight's program is mostly her pictures. I would say 90% or more of this tonight's program is her photography as we have traveled across the nation and across Australia and whatnot. So this is something that, if you like the pictures, thank her for it, because she's the one who took most of them. But when we look at nature, what do we see? Is nature a simple display of a few basic components that are all alike? Or is nature found to be far more complex than we ever dreamed possible? When God created the universe, he made a construction that we can only begin to comprehend with our limited knowledge. So perhaps we can focus on the earth to try to understand one small speck of creation. When previous generations tried to comprehend our world, they found such intricacies that they often resorted to superstition to explain the mysteries. Modern science has delved deeply into the lives of plants and animals and the ways that they interact. But instead of reaching the end of the mysteries, science has only uncovered new questions that lead to even more mysteries. In fact, science is as far from solving the intricacies of nature now as it was centuries ago. God made life more interlocked than seems possible. Plants and animals and the world that supports them are meshed together in a web of interactions. We have found that every form of life is dependent upon another form. If we pluck one thread of life, we find it attached to the rest of creation. Plants require both animals and other plants. Animals require both plants and other animals. Both plants and animals require the minerals, gases, and weather that the planet provides. And we have found the same is true of us. Humans are more dependent than we realize on the complex interactions of all life around us. Often we assume that we are so advanced in technology and civilization that we are now immune to what happens in nature. But with each new discovery and each new interaction found, we find that we actually depend on a great many other forms of life for our own existence. Rather than being impregnably secure, humans are actually on a knife edge of survival, relying on a host of other organisms for our very existence. This is no surprise, as God has created all life to be dependent upon other life. So what are the interactions that we need to survive? Is it really true that without a particular animal, we would die? And if so, which ones? We would be well advised to discover and protect the animals we need to keep alive. In this program, we will examine those processes that God established on earth that maintain human life and the individual animals that make those processes work. We might be surprised by which are the most important animals to our survival. Now, of course, everything that I'm talking about here tonight is God's backup plan. The perfect world of Eden was a very different place than what we see now. No death, disease, danger, or competition existed. When sin began, almost every aspect of life had to change. God had to totally remake his original creation. Without drastic intervention, life on earth would likely have ceased to exist. So we should remember that the nature we study today is not God's original plan, but rather his temporary way of dealing with the curse of sin. Also, it should be noted that everything I say here tonight is a simplified version of the complexities that exist in nature. To go into excessive detail would take more time than we have and needlessly confuse the issue. There are exceptions and subtleties to every area we will examine. But the first concept we're going to look at tonight is pollination, And to do so, we must first look at the plant world. Without plants, the survival of most animal life is impossible. Plants produce the oxygen animals must breathe. No plants, no more breathing. But there is a second major service plants provide: food. Without plants, most life will starve. Even predators depend upon plants to feed their vegetarian prey. So whatever keeps plants alive is obviously crucial. Plants grow from a seed, reach maturity, and then reproduce the next generation. Now, plants usually reproduce by cross-pollination. This gives plants diverse genes that keep them healthy. Some plants, especially conifer trees, let their pollen blow randomly on the wind. But most plants use animals to spread their pollen to others of their species, including most food plants that we eat. 70% of flowering plants need insects to pollinate them, including 2/3 of our crops. Plants attract specific animals to their flowers, place pollen on the animals, and then gather the pollen brought to them by the animals. So now we will examine animal pollinators, as they must do the job of pollination, or we will die. Bats pollinate many desert and tropical plants. They drink nectar from night flowers and carry pollen upon their fur. Birds that drink nectar do the same thing with day-blooming flowers. But relatively few birds or mammals pollinate. Of the other vertebrates, only some gecko species regularly visit flowers and carry pollen, especially in jungles. The vast majority of pollination is done by insects. The insect pollinators are legion: butterflies by day, moths by night. Bees and wasps either visit many varieties or are specialized for a single species. We all know that honeybees industriously drink from flowers, but native bees, usually small, are actually much more important in keeping plants thriving. Localized bee species are the backbone of healthy ecosystems and habitats. Some bees, such as bumblebees, vibrate their bodies at a specific frequency to loosen pollen grains for collection. Certain plants require this buzz pollination for existence. Beetles come in so many forms that it's no surprise that a large group of them are pollinators. Tiny beetles are often abundant, all working hard, feeding themselves and keeping their food source successful. We think of flies as biters and spreaders of disease, but only a few species actually do so. Most flies drink nectar from all types of flowers. Flies have scent detectors on their head and large eyes with color vision to help them find flowers. Taste receptors on their legs and feet let flies taste the flowers before they ever stick their tongue in. We know of over 1,100 plant species pollinated by flies. So when it comes to our food, clothing made from plants, and the very air we breathe, we depend upon the great insect world in all its many forms. This is why pesticides have been so dangerous. For every harmful insect species killed, many more harmless and beneficial insect species are also destroyed. Every insect form lost will mean the plants that rely on them will be lost too. Areas in China that have lost insect pollinators now require humans to hand pollinate each individual flower. Do we really want to take on the arduous job of pollinating our food ourselves? Insects pollinate plants for free and are happy to do it. Temporarily reducing mosquitoes is not worth losing our food supply. In one case, 50,000 bumblebees were killed after insecticides were sprayed on trees to kill aphids. This was in a shopping center parking lot near Portland, Oregon. 50,000 bumblebees from one application of pesticides. Is killing a few aphids the easy way really worth it? Our next one, decomposition and waste removal. If pollination is the science of the continuation of life, then decomposition is the science of the end of life. Death is always a tragedy, never part of God's original plan, and will be eradicated when all is made new. But for now, death is an element of existence that we cannot ignore. At the time of the fall, God recreated a huge segment of the life He made to deal with the new reality of sin. Death now was part of life, and if He hadn't, nothing would have lasted for long, as we will see. When a body dies, animal or plant, the cells cease to function, but they don't disappear by themselves. Other organisms are needed to physically break them down and recycle the nutrients for use again. Whole new kinds of life, unneeded in perfect Eden, became indispensable. Bacteria, which is neither animal nor plant, was tasked to do this on the microscopic scale. Fungi, another unique form of life, also became a force for decomposition, attacking both dead plants and animals. Fungi is incredibly diverse and has many beautiful forms, but the real work of fungi happens invisibly in the dead wood and soil and grass all around us. Aiding these microscopic workers are the slightly more visible animals digesting dead plant and animal tissues and cells. Beetles are fantastic in this area, both as adults and as larvae. Munching away on dead wood, larvae break wood down to even smaller parts that can be tackled by bacteria. Carpenter ants grind up dead wood in bulk, turning it into sawdust. Dust mites live in our homes and devour the skin that we shed constantly. Without dust mites, we would be wading through our own lost skin cells like snow. Not a terribly pleasant image. Beetle larvae also tackle animal corpses. Carrion beetles arrive from far and wide as soon as an animal dies. Dermestid or skin beetles are so efficient at stripping flesh from bone that museum curators use them to clean skeletons before mounting them for display. Many flies lay their eggs on dead bodies, and their larvae quickly eat it. Many adult wasps feed their young with flesh that they have scavenged. Yellow jackets and other hornets are like small vultures, cleaning up tiny bodies before they rot. Normal vultures do the same on a much larger scale. They are among the many birds that scavenge, like caracaras and ravens and marabou storks. Many mammals do the same. Jackals, hyenas, and foxes all specialize in following other predators and cleaning up the leftovers. Lobsters clean up the seafloor, removing decaying carcasses. Conch and whelk snails eat dead fish as well, using a long tube mouth to reach into small spaces that others cannot reach. Water snakes eat dead and dying fish before bacteria can pollute our fresh water. Wolverines are as happy to scavenge as they are to hunt for live prey. Why is all of this important? Without plant decomposers, all dead plants would lock up the nutrients they had absorbed during life. With no nutrient recycling, the soil would become impoverished to the point of uselessness. Plus, the heaps of dead plants would soon pile so high as to bury everything around them. Nothing new could grow, and eventually all life on Earth, including us, would cease. But thanks to the decomposers, decaying plant cells release nutrients for reuse by the next generation of growth, and so life continues. Animal corpses have an additional complication. As they putrefy, corpses foster disease, and so need to be removed as quickly as possible. So all the varieties of scavengers are vital in maintaining a clean habitat and preventing disease. Again, without scavengers, dead bodies would soon cover the landscape and make life unbearable. There is one more related area that needs addressing: waste removal. When vertebrate animals leave waste behind, it is a health hazard. Even when some animals, like cats, carefully bury their waste, that still doesn't solve the problem. It's still there, and someone has to clean it up and prevent contamination from spreading. Many specialized insects are tasked with this important cleanup, but the most famous are the dung beetles. Found throughout the world in desert and grassland ecosystems, 6,000 dung beetle species are vital in cleaning up the dung of many herbivores. By burying waste, they achieve soil aeration and fertilization, they reduce fly and parasitic worm numbers, and they plant seeds in safe growing spots. A beetle finds a fresh manure pile and goes to work, carving out a ball to lay her eggs on. Usually, she will need to move it to a proper place to bury it, and so the great backwards rolling expedition begins. She will push her treasure over every obstacle until she finds that perfect spot. She can roll a ball 50 times her own weight. Now, this is something that has finally been appreciated in many places, and protection has been given to these very important animals to keep them from being destroyed. And even some artists have chosen to make giant sculptures to represent the small but important work that dung beetles do. And dung beetles are the only insect proven to navigate by starlight, using the Milky Way as a guide. Star-gazing beetles. How about that? Our next one, soil and water processing. Now, in order for plants to grow properly, soil needs to be well aerated and well fertilized with various nutrients. Enter the many species of humble earthworm. Feeding underground on soil, they break up compacted soil into much healthier loam, ready for plant germination. Also, soil goes in one end of the worm and fertilizer comes out the back end. A healthy earthworm population processes 40 tons of dirt per acre every year. Other insect burrowers, including ants, beetles, and millipedes, process soil as well. Ants may even be the most essential in bringing minerals to the surface to replenish our topsoil. So we can thank these tiny hidden creatures for productive soil. Clean water is mandatory for human existence. As water gets dirty, a cleanup system engages to purify it. Marshes and swamps clean the water that passes through them by filtering out the toxins. God gave us wetlands to be a giant filtration system catching impurities in the water. As these habitats have been drained and filled with soil, the water flowing through does not get cleaned, resulting in polluted drinking water and poisoned animals. One of the key animals for cleaning water is the mussel. Found in flowing fresh water, mussels burrow into the mud and pump water through their bodies using powerful siphons. They filter out their microscopic food and in the process remove pollution from the water. One mussel can filter over 18 gallons of water every day. Amazingly, some mussels have been found to live over a century, never moving from their chosen spot. God certainly gave the mussel a supply of patience when he handed out gifts to his animals. In saltwater, oysters and clams and scallops do the same job cleaning toxins from the water that mussels do in freshwater, storing them in their bodies in ever-increasing amounts. In recent years, these animals have registered some of the most polluted bodies in the sea. Without them taking the brunt of our contamination, seawater would have deteriorated much faster and reduced our own survival. Next, plant health. Now, since we already have seen how important plants are to our survival, any animals that care for plants are crucial as well. Many animals are gardeners, planting seeds for their own purposes. Ants are especially adept at this, tending both flowers and whole trees around the world. The acacia ant lives inside hollow thorns of acacia trees, driving away any animal or plant that threatens or competes with the tree. The acacia provides sweet ant nectar from wells on the stems as a reward for the ants to drink. With all their food and shelter needs provided for by the plant, the ants can focus on attacking any plant and animal that comes near their acacia home. Banana slugs aid the sprouts of giant redwood trees by eliminating the competition. They've actually done studies on little plots of ground where they kept everybody out but the banana slugs, and they have found that those areas, the seedlings of redwoods, grow much quicker and much healthier because the banana slugs have eliminated their competition. Excuse me. I would appreciate somebody getting me some water. I think I'm getting a bit of an attack here. So that was a fascinating study because we're up in Northern California, close to the redwoods, and so we love redwood forests, and we have been into these places many times. And to find out that the most important animal of the habitat are these guys is quite shocking because they're the ones keeping the ecosystem healthy for the redwoods because they've eaten everything else. So we found that to be totally fascinating. Slugs in their natural habitat can be helpful gardeners. Bats transport rainforest fruit seeds to new locations. Thank you very much. Give me a moment here. Birds do the same in every warm habitat on Earth. They eat the seeds pass unharmed through the bird's system and get dropped with a bit of fertilizer to get them started. In some cases, seeds can only grow after they have passed through the intestines of a specific mammal, such as African acacia seeds eaten by elephants. Grass is an enormously crucial plant, relied on for food by many animals. It grows very fast from underground runners. Grasslands have been described as upside-down forests, as most of each grass plant grows underground. When grazers eat the above-ground leaves, the underground stem allows instant regrowth. Fresh grass is more easily digested than old, tough grass, so the faster grass is eaten, the more nutritious the grassland will be. Cows, antelopes, rhinos, sheep, horses, and rabbits are all built to eat grass, keeping the grass renewed. But the most important grazers are not what we might expect. Termites abound in every tropical grassland. There are 1/2 ton of termites for every human being on Earth. Each mound contains several million individuals, all working to maintain the colony. Grassland termite species feed on grass, clipping them down to the ground, letting new growth spring up and regenerate. Grasshoppers do the same thing in temperate grasslands. Even before bison were destroyed from the Great Plains, grasshoppers were as important as bison in eating grass. Rather than being pests out to eat our crops, God designed grasshoppers to cycle nutrients to keep the habitat healthy. Trees have mutual interactions with fungi that keep them healthy. Fungi attach to underground roots and enable them to absorb water and nutrients more efficiently. As new seedlings sprout, they bond with the fungi around them, giving them the best chance of survival. When clear-cutting removes the entire forest from a landscape, there are negative results. The sun dries and heats the exposed ground and kills the local fungi. If there are uncut forests nearby, the fungi can recolonize the newly replanted seedlings. But when clear-cuttings devastate too large an area, the fungal partners are lost and the regrown forests are crippled. We now know that 80% of plant species have symbiotic relationships with fungi. So animals that maintain the fungi populations are very important. Principal among these in temperate forests are rodents, such as voles, pocket gophers, and deer mice. They dig up truffles and other species and spread spores throughout the forest. The health of giant trees, hundreds of years old, and the entire ecosystem that they support can ultimately be traced to the tiny mammals scurrying through the branches or the undergrowth. God uses these humble creatures to maintain his special gardens. When it comes to soil health and the grass and trees that we depend upon, there is an exceptionally complicated network of microbes, plants, animals, and fungi maintaining the whole. Most of these are still barely understood, and more interactions are being discovered constantly. As we cut down the forests, spray pesticides and herbicides irresponsibly, and kill the animals, we break connections and destroy vital processes God established long ago. Destroying the network we depend upon is an unintelligent plan. There is one more benefit that plants provide humans besides air or food. Modern studies have found that experiencing nature results in physical and mental healing. People heal better and faster in a country setting than a city one. Patients looking at visual scenes of flowers and flowing water and forests have a reduction of pain levels, even during surgery. Exercise experienced in a natural setting increases its effectiveness when compared to exercise experienced indoors or on city streets. God revealed this to his messenger over a century ago. Nature is God's physician, the pure air, the glad sunshine, the beautiful flowers and trees, the orchards and vineyards, and outdoor exercise amid these surroundings are health-giving, the elixir of life. There are life-giving properties in the balsam of the pine, in the fragrance of the cedar and the fir, and there are other trees that are health-promoting. Let no such trees be ruthlessly cut down. Cherish them where they are abundant, and plant more where there are but few. Testimonies, Volume 7, page 76 to 77. Now, Satan knows this, and he has tricked people into fearing nature as dangerous. Biophobia is a real mental disease that the devil inflicts upon many people. The same people that happily drive around cities in the death traps that we call cars are scared to take a walk in the woods where they think animals are waiting to attack them around every corner. In the United States, an average of 40,000 people are killed every year in auto accidents. Around 88,000 die from drinking alcohol, and a staggering 500,000 die from tobacco use, including 50,000 non-smokers who are killed from secondhand smoke. Less than 100 Americans are killed by wild animals each year. Now compare that to everything else on this graph. And most of those deaths are allergic reactions to honeybee stings, not the extremely rare predator attacks overhyped by the media. Spiders only account for about 7 of those less than 100 deaths, and snakes only cause about 5 per year. No animal you can think of kills even a fraction as many people as car accidents, smoking, or poor diets. Satan fools people into fearing the activities in nature that will actually heal their mind and body. You should be far more terrified of the smoker you pass on the street than the snake in your backyard. The real danger to our health comes not from the wild, but from civilization. Our next subject is predation. And this becomes more complicated because animals feeding upon other animals is a very complicated topic for a creationist. Now, I look at this in more detail than we have time tonight in my program, Red in Tooth and Claw, who created the predators, where we get into that from the Bible, spirit of prophecy, and nature to see how the animals changed at the time of the fall into what they are now. So I'm not going to go through all of that. I'm just going to summarize briefly. Without predators in our world, animals would overpopulate and soon starve. The animals that feed on other animals, the predators, are indispensable in maintaining other animal populations at healthy levels. When predators are eliminated by human beings, their prey soon overpopulates, spreads disease, and die in large crashes. So all predators are crucial to maintaining healthy ecosystems and all the life that depends on them, including us. Predators come in all sizes and forms. Every type of animal has predators among its ranks. From the largest animal on Earth, the blue whale, to tiny insects, such as assassin bugs, we find predators. They form an indispensable part of every ecosystem on Earth, land or sea. Remove predators from any habitat and the system immediately begins to break down. Restore them and life begins to stabilize. For example, gray wolves reintroduced into Yellowstone National Park in the 90s have changed the entire ecosystem for the better. Thanks to wolves reducing the overpopulation of elk, many overgrazed areas are now recovering. Surprisingly, wolves have aided species such as the quaking aspen, golden-eyed ducks, and grizzly bears. Once the elk numbers reached a healthier level, the damage caused by them by overgrazing was eliminated, and the habitats revived, especially streamside areas. Despite these proven benefits, wolves and all other predators are hated and destroyed savagely. Around the world, snakes and otters and seals have been senselessly slaughtered because of their diet. Hawks, owls, and eagles get the shoot-on-sight treatment as well. We poison predatory fish so that we can have more game fish for our exploitation. Around the Great Lakes, cormorants are being pointlessly destroyed at the whims of fishermen. All of this is a visceral reaction to systems we don't understand, as we eliminate the animals that keep these systems healthy. Some of the most crucial predators are the insect eaters. For every human being on Earth, an estimated 200 million insects exist. Due to insects' enormous reproductive abilities, we need all the help we can get in keeping even the beneficial ones from taking over. Chief among our allies are the spiders. They are actually insect-catching specialists. Some actively chase their prey, pursuing small insects and using their venom to subdue them. Wolf spiders are named for the large canines to illustrate the spider's hunting prowess. The lynx spiders make up another group of often brightly colored ambush spiders. Night-crawling spiders emerge after dark to hunt. Spitting spiders spit glue onto their prey, gumming them down until they can be eaten. Jumping spiders have extremely diverse colors and forms, some very flamboyant. They leap upon their prey like leopards, using the best vision that God gave to any of the spiders. They are the only spiders that will relate to us, turning curiously to watch us as we watch them. Many spiders use silk to make insect traps. Orb weavers lay out a large web that catches insects with sticky threads. Sheet webs are non-sticky webs that entangle prey long enough for the spider to run out and seize it. Dozens of other web styles snare insects in different ways. Without spiders catching their food, we would be overrun by insects, and nobody wants that. Every time we crush a spider, we are allowing hundreds of insects to live and reproduce. Rather than being an enemy, spiders are our allies that God has tasked in keeping insects controlled. The mosquito carrying the disease that will kill you can be caught and eaten by a spider first, but only if you don't kill that spider. Now, spiders are classed as arachnids, a different group from insects. But there are several other insect-eating arachnid groups besides spiders that most people have never even heard about. They are some of the strangest-looking life forms that God ever created. Solifuges race after insect prey at up to 10 miles per hour in deserts around the world. The hairs that cover them detect odors, vibrations, and chemicals. When they catch a meal, they chew it up with their enormous jaws. Pseudoscorpions are micropredators that can live in many strange places, such as pine cones, caves, or even under the wings of beetles. Most carry their babies in a pouch and feed them a form of milk. And this right here next to my thumb is a very large pseudoscorpion. Most of them are smaller than this. Vinegaroons subdue food by spraying vinegar-scented acid from their tail. They use their heavy front pinchers to hold prey and their delicate second pair of legs as feelers. These guys act aggressive and they put their arms up to fight you off, but they're really harmless. But they do smell like vinegar potato chips when they spray their vinegar. Harvestmen tiptoe around trees and on the ground, sometimes gathering into dense clusters. Note that these are not spiders, as spiders have a body divided into two distinct parts, while a harvestman has one single oval body part. It's a different group from spiders. In humid tropics, tailless whip scorpions grab their quarry with long bent front legs that they can fold out of their way. They are so flat that they can live safely underneath loose tree bark. Scorpions use their venomous stingers to subdue their insect prey. Now, of all of these weird arachnids, only some of the scorpions pose any danger to man. The rest are all totally harmless, despite their fearsome appearances. Humans have invented artificial ideas of beauty and ugliness and condemn those animals which don't fit our prejudices. But as the writer Montaigne wrote, those which we call monsters are not so with God. But we've only looked at the arachnids that feast on insects. There are many others that do this important job as well. Insect-feeding bats are especially well designed for this, as one bat can catch 2,000 to 3,000 insects every night. A single colony of bats eats hundreds of tons per night. Insectivore mammals like shrews eat their weight in insects every day. They scurry through the ground cover, pouncing on any small prey that they can find. Some ant species raid in swarms, devouring all insect life in their path. Praying mantis seize food with their strong, fast forearms. Chameleons snag insects with a long, sticky tongue. A single bird captures thousands of insects to feed themselves and their chicks. 90% of birds feed on insects at some stage of their life. Anteaters slurp up tens of thousands of ants or termites with their enormously long tongue. Frogs sit by the water and eat mosquitoes as they emerge out of the water before they can do any harm to anyone. Flycatchers dash out from a high tree perch and snag flying insects. Dragonflies and damselflies spend all day grabbing insects on the wing, while their young do the same underwater to aquatic insect larvae. Fence and rock lizards pick off flies wherever they land. Swallows rake the air for the gnats and flies that they need. Armadillos shuffle through soil and leaf litter as they smell their way to lunch. Even fish get in on the insect action by leaping above the surface to grab low flyers. This is only a tiny list of insect feeders. Every species contributes to the effort of maintaining insects below explosion populations. When predators are killed, deliberately or accidentally, the insects are able to increase, and this has often happened. When exploding insect levels eat our food supply, spread disease, or invade our homes, we often find that the controlling predators have been lost through our own carelessness or cruelty. The entire system of predation is part of the intricate system called the food web. Now, many people think that this is what the food chain looks like, where humans are at the center of the food chain and everything points to us. But it really is more like this. Every animal and plant on Earth is part of this interconnected web, since life cannot exist apart from it. Plants are fed upon by herbivores, and predators catch both herbivores and other predators. Every animal is built to eat specific types of food and cannot just change to another food source on a whim. In grasslands, birds are dependent upon grasshoppers to raise their chicks. Now, if the grasshoppers are destroyed, so are the birds. Prairie birds have starved many times after insecticides have destroyed their insect food. Now, some animals eat many types of food. If they lose a critical food source at a key time of year, it won't matter if the rest of the year's food is abundant. For example, grizzly bears feed on grass, berries, meat, fish, and grubs, depending upon the time of year. For the bears of Yellowstone National Park and areas near there, for a few weeks each year, bears climb the mountains and start overturning rocks where cutworm moths gather. A single bear eats 10 to 40,000 moths every day. In 1 month, a bear will eat a fourth of his entire caloric intake for the whole year. If they miss their moth feast, they enter hibernation undernourished and may starve. When any part of the food chain is lost, a ripple takes place that affects everything in the web around it. Lose enough species and the effect is magnified. Eventually, a crash will devastate the local ecosystem, leaving very few working parts left. We depend upon these systems as well, so when we lose them, we end up hurting ourselves. Examples of this can be found throughout the world, but are especially obvious in the oceans. When the Newfoundland fishermen of Canada overfished the cod, a collapse occurred that destroyed their entire industry. Over 30 years later, the cod are still gone, and they are not coming back. To deflect criticism for their incompetence, the Canadian government and the fishing industry created a false scapegoat of the harp seal. They claim that seals are destroying the cod and therefore have to be eliminated. But in reality, these seals eat other fish that eat cod. So they're actually beneficial to the cod by eating the cod's real predators. So now savage men slaughter hundreds of thousands of baby seals every year, hoping to exterminate them completely. Killing is done in the most barbaric, cruel conditions imaginable, and the ocean system continues to disintegrate. We are destroying our own life support system by our stubborn foolishness. Many pieces of many habitats have already been lost. Some have been lost for so long that we don't even realize what we are missing or how impoverished nature has become. When John Muir walked across the Central Valley of California over a century ago, he described endless flower fields in pristine grasslands. None of that complex habitat has survived, none of it, and all the resident animals have disappeared. Too many species and habitats are following that route to oblivion as land is lost to development. We need the diversity of life far more than we need another sprawl mart. So now we've looked at the various different aspects of these ecosystem services that the animals provide. Now we're going to put it all together and figure out what we can learn from what has been put forth so far. We have looked at a few facets of life to see how they work together. We have only examined those areas that include living organisms. We haven't even touched non-living processes such as fire, weather, or the seasons. They are also extremely complex and have massive effects on our planet's life. But I have focused our study on the plants, animals, and other organisms to illustrate the God-given importance of life maintaining other life. What are the lessons that can be learned from this examination of the natural world? And what are the effects on our daily lives? The first issue of critical importance is that Earth's system of life is so complex and interdependent that there is no way that it could function except as a working whole. All the pieces have to be functioning together. Remove part of the system and the rest will stop functioning. This means that the evolutionary theory does not explain how the primordial Earth could have grown from a primitive ecosystem to the complex one we see today. There are so many working pieces in the system that the slowly increasing complexity that evolution demands is impossible to realize. No system we study becomes more complex as it develops. This is both logical and demonstrable, since we can find this repeatedly in nature and the world around us, unlike the fanciful and scientifically unprovable claims of evolution. Without God's intervention, everything breaks down rather than improving. The evolution-killing concept of irreducible complexity applies just as well to our ecological system as it does to microscopic structures. Life could never have lasted long enough to diversify into a self-sustaining bionetwork, so the study of ecology is a study refuting evolution. If we try to understand our world only using naturalistic scientific principles, we will fail. Unless we include God's overall role in shaping and reshaping the system, we will lose our way in endless philosophical quagmires. Ellen White describes this perfectly. Young men talk about science and are wise above that which is written. They seek to explain the ways and works of God to meet their finite comprehension, but it is all a miserable failure. True science and inspiration are in perfect harmony. False science is something independent of God. It is pretentious ignorance. Testimonies, Volume 4, page 584. Now, the second lesson of importance concerns the animals themselves. When we look at the animal life that God has made, we find it to be overwhelmingly composed of invertebrates. Vertebrate mammals, fish, reptiles, amphibians, and birds compose only 3 to 4% of the total discovered species, and over half of those vertebrates are found in the fish world. One family of insects, the beetles, have over 350,000 named species, with many more waiting to be discovered. But there are only around 4,000 total mammal species, with relatively few left to be identified. And it is not only species diversity in which invertebrates dominate. The total number of individual invertebrates are millions of times greater than individual vertebrates, including ourselves. If we add up the total weight, now this is fascinating, listen to this. If we add up the total weight in tons of all the animals on land, we find that insects by themselves reach 85 to 93% of the total weight. This is astonishing and completely turns our perceptions upside down. If all vertebrate animals went extinct tomorrow, invertebrate animals would be disrupted, and some would themselves go extinct, but many would settle out and continue to function normally. But if all invertebrates went extinct tomorrow, the vertebrates would quickly follow them into extinction. This includes humans, since we could not exist for even a few months without the ecosystem services maintained by invertebrates. This really shows how complex God has made our world. Life is not made up of individual parts that can be casually destroyed with no consequences. Humans have been busily destroying many species of plants and animals for centuries. Some of the species lost have been of limited impact. Some lost species have had ripple effects that have resulted in other species also going extinct. And some lost species have had major impacts on the ecosystem. How many species can we lose in any local area without beginning a chain reaction of destruction? We have no idea, but many local ecosystems have already been destroyed in this way. On a worldwide scale, we are playing a global game of Russian roulette, where every lost plant or animal takes us another step toward disaster. 76%, 3/4, of flying insects' numbers have vanished since 1989. An unexpected side effect of this is that our value judgments of an animal's importance are usually way off. We look at giant pandas, or whooping cranes, or white rhinos, and we are concerned about their rarity and are often willing to work to prevent their extinction. And this is good, since they are wonderful animals that should be protected. But if any of them went extinct, the results to the ecosystem would be fairly limited. But if a worm or beetle or shrimp or mussel is rare, we are indifferent and make no effort to protect them. When they go extinct, the damage to us is much worse than if a more charismatic bird or mammal is lost. People wonder why I spend so much of my presentations looking at invertebrates, the insects, the spiders, the little creepy crawlies, when there are so many pretty birds and cute mammals available for study. Don't we want more cute mammals? Stop showing us bugs. But not only does the Bible tell us to go to the ant in Proverbs, but Ellen White gives us a wonderful glimpse of God's view of life. The perfection of God's work is as clearly seen in the tiniest insect as in the king of birds. Testimonies, Volume 4, page 591. We must stop categorizing animals into good or bad, important or irrelevant, useful or disagreeable. We know too little most of the time to make value judgments of any species' worth. The most ignorant question asked by humans is, what good is that animal? All species matter to God, or he would not have created them as part of his plan. Now, this does not mean that there are not pests to be dealt with. Due to sin, some animals have been changed by Satan to directly cause humans problems. Parasites are clearly part of Satan's attack upon our well-being. Parasites serve no useful function to any other life. They only cause harm. Other animals compete with us indirectly as they eat our food or damage our homes. We must protect ourselves from injury from animals that harm us. But we must be careful to only control these animals that are actually problems. Too often we destroy every insect and spider for the high crime of being an insect or spider. We casually crush every small life form as if it is our duty to eliminate the creatures that God has made. Is it a sin to kill insects? No. Ellen White has made this clear. Letters have come to me asking in regard to the teaching that nothing that has life should be killed, not even insects, however annoying or distressing they may be. The Lord has never given any human being such a message. God has told no one that it is a sin to kill the insects which destroy our peace and rest. Selected Messages, Volume 1, page 170. So we are not talking here about a moral issue. By contrast, it is a sin to kill animals for sport, for their fur, or for blood-filled meat, as I look and examine in my presentation, Animals, Ethics, and Christianity. Obviously, killing insect pests do not fit these categories. But do we really want to kill the invertebrates which aid us? Should we kill the insects that pollinate our food, that recycle our soil and forest nutrients, and that clean up pollution? If we look at the financial benefit of insects in the U.S. economy alone, insects save us $57 billion per year, and this amount is a conservative estimate. It is probably much greater. We need a much better understanding of nature to know which species are harmful and which species are helpful. Then we can target more intelligently those species that really are a threat. We fear spiders, but of the Earth's 38,000 described species of spiders, less than 100 have a strong enough venom and bite to be dangerous. And of these, only 2 kinds are native to North America, the brown recluse and the black widow. And only the black widow is freely found in California. Besides a few strays that get packed into boxes and brought from Oklahoma or Arkansas, we do not have brown recluses in California. The vast majority of spiders should be left alone to do the job God directed them to do. If we wanted to roughly estimate, probably 80 to 90% of invertebrate life are useful to us directly or to the ecosystem that we depend upon. Only a tiny fraction actually cause us harm. So we should be educated as to which those are and leave the useful majority alone. This is not sentimental New Age mysticism. This is self-interest and preservation of ourselves and the system that God has established. Our final important lesson is how careful we need to be with the life that we depend upon. As we have seen, human life depends upon animal life to exist. So we need to protect all the pieces that keep this system functioning well. Now this seems obvious, but humans have a terrible track record when it comes to protecting important creatures. If a moth or a crayfish, a mussel or a frog becomes rare enough to need protecting, the usual reaction by people is anger and resistance. Anything that interferes with business or recreation or blood sports is fought viciously, especially if it is to protect some worthless bug. So we let tiny and valuable creatures die and mourn them not, even though priceless and unique creations of God are lost. The variety of life, called biodiversity, is one of the most valuable commodities in the entire world. It is the fiber that holds our life support system together. The greater the diversity, the stronger the system. Now, island ecosystems are more easily destroyed because they lack this diversity. When the inhabitants of Easter Island cut down their forests and destroyed their native animals, they destroyed their own ability to survive. Their entire society imploded as resources disappeared. With no trees left to build boats, they had no way to escape, and most of them died, some even turning to cannibalism. Our modern world is following the same path of self-destruction by degrading the network of life that we rely upon. Every day in the U.S., 6,000 acres of natural habitat are destroyed, either paved or farmed for cow feed or strip mined. All the resident animals and plants in those areas will die since they have nowhere else to go. Does anyone think this is a good idea? Every day another 6,000 acres lost? Appalachian mountaintops destroyed for coal, or farmland wasted on high fructose corn syrup, or deserts paved for the next identical shopping center 2 miles closer to our home. Since 1970, the world has lost half its land and freshwater animals. Now, this is not species lost by extinction, but actual individuals of all animals, both common and rare, destroyed for food, sport, greed, or lost habitat. So if you had a habitat of an acre that had 100 animals of a particular species, you will now go back to that same acre and find 50. 50% lost over the last 50 years. And since we look at this, we also find that the world seabird populations in the same time period have also dropped by 70%. It's even worse in that than it is on the land. This is a massive drop that shows how badly we have harmed sea life. Even more shocking, monarch populations have dropped by 80 to 90% in the last decade, as we have invented new dangerous pesticides and started using genetically modified organisms for human foods. Now, this is something that in California I have grown up with. In olden days, I would go to the coastline, Monterey, Natural Bridges State Park in the wintertime, and you would see trees hanging, dripping with monarch butterflies by the thousands. I would go north of San Francisco, and I would be in the dunes in remote areas where no people are, and I'd be hiking through the dunes, and I'd hike into a little pocket out of the wind, and there would be monarchs hanging from a tree where nobody was looking. Monarchs were up and down the coast everywhere in the wintertime, and then during the summer they would go back and spread back into the mountains and forests where they live. Now those monarch populations have declined by a shocking 99%. There's virtually none left. You go to these places in the winter and you see half a dozen in a tree. It is just astonishing in my lifetime how quickly the monarch population has just disintegrated. And they are almost at the verge of going away entirely if a disaster would hit them at any bad spot in their life cycle. And that leads us to the fact that 40% of all insects are currently heading toward extinction worldwide. And that is a difficult thing to reconcile when we think of nearly half of insects are going away right now. Consumerism is the curse of our age, putting greed and fashion before health and sanity. Now, don't misunderstand me. I did not say capitalism, of which I totally support. I said consumerism, which is the endless buying of things we already have or don't need. We measure success by how much money we spend, how well we keep up with the Joneses, and how many toys we die with. By buying the latest device, the hippest outfit, and eating the trendiest diet, we are funding the continued destruction of the natural world. Inspiration condemned consumerism long before we ever even coined the term. We see men eagerly striving to accumulate property. They put forth all their energies, tact, wisdom, and inventive powers to gain their object in securing earthly treasures that they will not need and cannot use for their own profit or for their children's benefit. These persons have not time to devote to prayer, or to seek God, or to place themselves on the side of Christ. It is most sad, indeed, when those who profess godliness exhibit to the world such a perversion of their powers. All their powers are employed in securing earthly possessions, and time and talents, consequently, are spiritually dwarfed. Review and Herald, March 1, 1887. Now, environmentalists talk about taking shorter showers, driving electric cars, and recycling. Those are their main messages of reform. But they usually ignore the single greatest way of preventing destruction to nature, and that is by our diet. Huge areas of forest and grassland are destroyed to raise farmed animals. 75% of all the grain grown and 50% of all the water used in America are wasted by the meat industry. A meat eater is responsible for this massive waste of natural resources. Farmed cattle alone consume enough grain to feed 8.7 billion humans. If meat eating ended, there would be enough vegetarian food available to feed the world's humans many times over. A meat eater is responsible for human starvation around the world. U.S. ranchers and farmers destroy competitors and predators by the millions, then slaughter 10 billion helpless livestock every year. A meat eater is responsible for this cruelty to both wild and domestic animals. And someone who avoids eating dairy products and eggs saves even more lives and resources, since those industries are just as cruel and wasteful. 33% of America's raw materials and fossil fuels are wasted by the meat industry. In a vegan economy, only 2% of those resources would need to be used for food. A vegan driving a Hummer wastes less energy than a meat eater driving a Prius. Just think about that for a moment. A vegan driving a Hummer wastes less energy than a meat eater driving a Prius. It takes 25 gallons of water to produce a pound of wheat, but 2,500 gallons to produce a pound of meat. A vegan can take a shower all day and use less water than a meat eater who never showers. Now, here we are in California. All of us have been here for some time, presumably, and so you watch the news every year, and guess what you see every single summertime? Pictures of reservoirs getting drained. It's drought season. We're all going to die because we don't have enough water. There's not enough water in the reservoirs. What are we going to do because we're all going to need water and there's nothing left? You hear that every year on the news. We're always being bombarded with this. And so, as Californians, we have been given incentives and sometimes mandates to reduce our water use, especially to get to a 25% reduction of our water use so that we can have enough water to survive. Sounds good on the surface to keep us all going because everybody needs water. So this is very important because a very detailed water footprint study was undertaken by a scientific group, and they've analyzed all water used in California. That's a water footprint study, where basically every single person, industry, source of any kind of water use was made to see what was being used by whom. And it turned out that private water use by Californians, you and me, citizens, just people watering our backyard, taking showers, drinking water, washing the car, doing whatever, use 4% of the total water use. 4% is not a lot. And if we successfully reduce it by 25%, we have saved 1% of the water use in California. Huzzah! This is not relevant. 1% water savings is not going to save or fix any of these problems. So if it's not us who are using the water, who is using the water in California? So the study went on and found that agriculture, first of all, if the question then is who is using the water and where is it all going? Now, if you have listened to any media sources over the last 25, 30 years, you will have been given a culprit. You will have been given a reason why we have no water for anybody in California, and that is because of a little bitty fish called the Delta smelt. It lives up in the San Francisco area in the Sacramento River. There's not many left. There's only a few left, and so therefore, the claim is made that these fish are using up all the water because of environmental regulation, and so that's why none of us have any water to go around, because these fish have been given all the water and we're all going to die because of it. That's the type of rhetoric that we get on the media. So maybe it's a really thirsty fish. Maybe he drank a lot of water. He's only about this big, but maybe he drank all of our water. We'll have to find out. The water footprint study went to find out this exact same thing. And so it went into the industrial realm. All industry, and I'm not getting into good or bad industry, that's not the point. All industry combined in California. How much water do they use? And it turns out, due to this very detailed study, it was found to they be using about 15% of the water. All right, we can deal with that. 15%, that's okay. That's functional. So what else? All right, agriculture. California is a huge state for growing food. And so all the food grown in California that gets fed to you and me, or sold to another state or to another country or whatever, doesn't matter, food grown in California for human consumption. How much water do they use? We've all heard how thirsty those almond trees are in the Sacramento Valley. They must be using up all our water. So let's find out. Turns out all agriculture combined for a human feeding is 15%, same as industry. Again, we can handle that. 15% is not terrible. We can deal with that sort of use. But now we've used up 15 for this and 15 for the other and 4 or 5% for ourselves, so that's only 35%. What is left? What is using all the water? Why do we have no water in California? Maybe it's that horrible little fish. In fact, when the study found is that the rest of the water use is used by one industry and one industry alone, the meat and dairy industry. 60 to 70% per year of water use in California is used by meat and dairy industry. That is shocking because that means that's the culprit. That's why we have no water left to go around. That's why we have to conserve our 1%, because this is using all the water and nobody's stopping them from using more. And so, in fact, this is the cause of our drought-type conditions. When we don't have enough rain and there's not enough water to go around, this is who to blame. It turns out the fish is a red herring, literally, in a misdirection and guile attempt to get us off the real culprit of the meat industry by focusing our attention on a scapegoat that in fact is not the problem in any way, shape, or form. And so when you hear these sorts of things about how terrible everything is because of these little fish, remember the true culprit at being the meat and dairy industry. And again, it's the cows and the pigs and the chickens and everything that are using all these waters, and they're not wanting to be part of this process either. They're not really the ones responsible. It's the ranchers who are making this possible. And so when we look at the water use in California, that is how it really breaks down. And this was an unquestioned study. They dotted all their I's and crossed their T's. This is not a study which is open to debate. They found this, and it is completely correct in its use of the water use in California. So let's remember that it's in fact the animals who are innocent in all of this process. It's the people manipulating them for their own good. So now back to our look at the way we use resources. Now, a vegan can never recycle and save more resources than a meat eater who recycles everything they have ever used. Meat is the driving force behind virtually every area where we are destroying ourselves. Deforestation, topsoil erosion, freshwater scarcity, air and water pollution, loss of biodiversity, social injustice, and the spread of human disease. To be a meat-eating environmentalist is an oxymoron. You cannot be both at the same time. You have to be either a meat eater or an environmentalist, never both. We need to make decisions about our priorities and how our actions affect the life around us. Killing animals because it is convenient or fashionable or profitable leads to the loss of those animals that keep us alive. Without animals, we will die. Some of us will die sooner and some of us later, but there are real and fatal consequences of losing species. The Endangered Species Act is the most important law ever passed to protect the diversity of life. It tries to restore rare animals and plants before they go extinct. It is hated beyond measure by industry and developers and has been attacked relentlessly for decades. The Endangered Species Act is actually a rescue net for humanity by saving the animals and plants that we depend upon. Until we learn to protect life rather than destroy it, we will continue to hurt ourselves and by our own short-sightedness. We should always remember that we do not own the animals that God made, and we do not own the earth or its inhabitants. This is shown in Psalms 50, verses 10 to 12. For every beast of the forest is mine, saith God, and the cattle upon 1,000 hills. I know all the fowls of the mountains, and the wild beasts of the field are mine. For the world is mine, and the fullness thereof. Thanks to sin, nature and animals suffer under the curse of sin. For we know that the whole creation groaneth and travaileth in pain together until now. Romans 8:22. But rather than just blaming Adam and Eve for everything that has happened since, God holds sinful humans of all ages responsible for the curse affecting the land and the animals. How long shall the land mourn, and the herbs of every field wither, for the wickedness of them that dwell therein? The beasts are consumed, and the birds, because they, the people, said, He shall not see our last end. Jeremiah 12, verse 4. The same thought is expressed in Isaiah 24, verse 5, and Hosea 4, 1-3. So humans, as caretakers of creation, can reduce the burden of sin by faithfully following all of God's directions as revealed by inspiration. Now, often Christians feel that what we do to this earth and the animals in it doesn't matter because Jesus is coming soon and it will start over with a perfect world. Unfortunately, God has not allowed us the luxury of such selfishness. God gave all of us a duty of stewardship for his creation. At the second coming, God brings reward and judgment to the living and the dead. Those who ignore God's commands will have a reward not to their liking. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou, God, shouldest give reward unto thy servants the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great, and shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. Revelation 11, verse 18. This is very serious and shows that God does not respect a trash the world and get a new one free attitude. Will the earth continue to be ruined by human greed and be eventually remade by Christ? Absolutely. Nothing we do will prevent that end result. But if we contribute to the continued death of life by our carelessness and selfishness, we will be held responsible for our choices. We find this in the words of Jesus. Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs be that offenses come, but woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. Matthew 18:7. So offense is going to happen. Evil will take place. Don't be part of the ones causing the evil. That's what Jesus is saying. And Ellen White says the same thing in modern language. There are many who will be deluded and who, by pen and voice, will cast their whole influence to create an evil condition of things, a condition that will exist just the same, whatever they may do, but they should not be bound up with the evil workers. Evil is going to exist. Wrong is going to be done. Don't be part of the evil and wrong being done. Stay out of it. Keep yourself clean. It doesn't matter what the world does. It's what you do that matters. We are always accountable for our own actions, even when evil continues without our participation. Child abuse, pornography, and even slavery will all exist until the second coming. But our loyalty to Christ will always shun and oppose these vices in all their forms. Our stewardship of animals, plants, and the land itself is a vital aspect of faithful Christianity, one that we ignore at our own peril. So when we look at the science of ecology, we find a wonderfully complex and important area of study. God has revealed himself in Earth's living systems by their infinite complexity that evolution could never have produced. Chaos cannot produce complexity. It never has, and it never will. Ecology is also a window into the wealth of species, large and small, that share our homes. From the largest whale to the tiniest living speck, we find most creatures working together to bring praises to their Creator by doing the job God assigned them. As we fulfill our own role as God's representatives and stewards, we will stand as faithful witnesses to the wonder and glory of our infinite Creator. So that's our look at the animals that we must have in order to survive. And it turns out there is not one animal, but in fact more than we can even count. These animals God has made are our lifeline and keep us going on this planet. And so that's why I didn't tell you ahead of time which one was the one, because there's too many to count. Now, for those who want some resources, here is a actual source for the water footprint study, which I was talking about, and also upon the fact that the meat eating is causing the droughts conditions for many different situations. Again, it's not about how much rain falls, it's how we use the rain once we get it, and the meat industry is what wastes it all the time. Also, we have those pesticides which are wiping out insect populations. Now, these are studies put out by the Xerces Society. And if you've never heard of them, they are an extremely useful group that does a lot of research, scientific research on invertebrate animals. They started out as a butterfly protection group up in Oregon, and they were named after the Xerces blue butterfly, which used to be found in San Francisco but has gone extinct. It was a beautiful little butterfly that only lived on one little hill in San Francisco. And so they have done more work than anybody else to find the science behind invertebrate losses and how important invertebrates are to the ecosystem. So I heartily recommend them as a very useful group in finding information about these sorts of issues. Because when we look at the multitude of groups out there which are protecting animals, we see all these various groups protecting farmed animals and rare species, endangered species overseas, and elephants and rhinos and all these sorts of animals. There's tons of groups doing that, and they're doing a good job. I'm not dismissing what they do. They're very useful. But there's very few groups which are actually helping to protect the invertebrates, because invertebrates don't get any attention or love or fundraising when it goes to protecting these animals which we are most dependent upon. So this is a very, very good group that I heartily recommend to anyone. So all of this information that I've been putting together for you is something that has been researched for the last few decades. Most of this information has not trickled down to the regular people out in the world, because these are all in scientific papers and various different studies which have been done that most people will never have a chance to research themselves. And so what I've done with this presentation is try to summarize and translate for you sitting in the pew, the layman, to be able to understand these big scientific concepts that most of us will never be able to tackle having the time. And so that's what I felt was important, to share with you information that most of us have never come across before. It is starting to trickle through through popular science to some of the people out in the world, and so that's good. But it's amazing how many new studies are finding out these sorts of things in our daily world. Now, to finish up, I'm just going to switch my program here. Don't turn on the light yet. I'm just going to do one thing here. I want to give you an idea of our materials that are available that you may not have seen before. This is what I did many years ago when I came here. The original presentation of the Blind Watchmaker. Now, the difference with this one is that we have redone it from scratch. It was our first one, and so we've made our newer material, and it's such higher quality than our first ones that we put out with all of our skills now that we've developed in making these DVDs, that we decided this one was looking a little old and shabby, so we tore it down to the ground floor and rebuilt it from scratch. So this is virtually a brand new program with all new music, sound effects, all the different pictures that we've used that we didn't have available 10 years ago when we were putting these together. So this, if you have the old version, it has been so differently remade that you will be astonished by it. This is our follow-up to it on the little-known miracles of God's creation. The miracles of gifts that He has given to animals are more amazing than we would ever have thought up ourselves in giving out gifts to animals. Every animal has something special that shows that God, the Creator, is more amazing and creative and powerful than we would ever dream possible. And so this is a real window into the fact that God is bigger than we could possibly imagine. Now, we have 4 specific programs for grade school kids, ages 5 to 12. And so these are designed for a younger audience because my material tends to go over the younger kids' heads. And so my wife, Delise, as a school teacher, is able to rework these into a format which is much more compatible for a younger audience. And so basically grade school ages 5 to 12. This one right here deals with the really strange shapes and forms God decided to make with animals. And the kids love that because there's so many weird shapes that God decided, I'm going to do it that way. And we're all the better for it because of it. This one right here is our newest presentation that we just finished this spring. It is a brand new program dealing with those wild animals related to our domestic animals. There's lots of wild animals out there in the cat and dog and horse and donkey and pig and sheep and goat families that are out there in the wild without any people involvement that are related to the animals that we have domesticated. And so this is an amazing journey around the world's life forms to show how God has made the wild versions of the domestic animals that we have as friends. This one right here is what we did tonight, basically the same program. This one right here is the animals which build homes for themselves or their young. The ability of animals to create architectural structures by itself destroys the theory of evolution. Evolution has no ability to refute why and how animals can build homes and pass that information on to their children. That is a huge way of looking at evolution and showing it to be false. This is what I talked about on the predators, red in tooth and claw, and how these animals were created by as vegetarians and then changed, and how that all happened. Very important to see how we relate to these animals, because they're not going to be this way in the new earth. So how do we deal with them now, since they're not part of God's plan A? They have to be part of God's plan B. These are our spotlights on creation. We have short programs instead of a long hour-and-a-half program. Each one of these is 10 to 15 minutes long, and so they deal with individual aspects of creation science, each one giving us some window to God's creative work that focuses on something. So this can be used as homeschool or for Sabbath school, or even like as a mission spotlight replacement. It's a creation spotlight. It can be used in your church, and you can use them as a way of showing each week something special about God's creation. This is one of our newest ones. This is our animals found in Australia and New Zealand. One of the most incredible creative acts God ever made is some of the animals down there. Totally different than any animals we're used to up here. This one was so special and so big that we had to we tried to condense it, but we couldn't do it until we made it into 2 discs. So this is twice as long as our normal programs, over 3 hours of material in this one, showing the incredible animals down under. Then this is my big program on our treatment of animals. Animals, ethics, and Christianity. God gave us dominion over the animals. What does that mean to us in the 21st century as Adventist Christians in today's society? This is so important because this is a sanctification issue. This affects our salvation. How we treat those helpless around us will show whether or not we are reflecting Christ's character in our lives. This is not, this is not a minor issue. This is also in book form, and as I said, we're going to be giving free copies of my book to everybody here, so make sure you get that before you leave. It's going to be over in the room, the fellowship hall, where our table material is available. Make sure you come over and get a copy of this. It is our free gift to you. It is our new Adventist version that we published about 5 years ago, and so if you got the old version many years ago, this is much bigger and more updated than the original one that we had back to 15, 20 years ago. So make sure you get that before you leave. All of my dad's materials are available as well in both book form, CD form, DVD form. Everything that he talked about today is available in the CD and DVD format. And so take a look at what you can find out there, because as I've told you before, we survive by sales. We don't ask for donations. We're not going to pass around a offering plate. If you want to support us, come to our table and take a look at anything on there, because all of that on the table goes to support our ministry. And all of that is something that we want you to have, because we want you to take this and restudy it and share it with your friends and family. We like you to get material because we want it to spread and not just be able to have something that you heard one time and never think about it again. We want this to be something that you can dig into and study for a longer time period. We also have a little table of various different leaflets that are free, and it's going to be a little separate from the main table, but this is all free material that I've just gathered at different places and from different sources, and I'm not trying to promote any one group or another. I'm just providing these little things that deal with various different aspects of our treatment of the natural world and our diet and that sort of thing. So take a look at the free leaflets, because that's, and again, our free gift to you. And if you don't find anything on the table of the sermons or the various books or whatever, take a look at my wife's artwork, because she paints pictures of animals upon rocks. And if you want to donate to our ministry, that you can get a rock as a gift from us in exchange for your donations. So we thank you very much for coming out to this last meeting of the day, and we're going to close the meeting now with prayer as we dismiss for the week and go about our way at the end of this very packed day. Father in heaven, we've looked at the most amazing animals you've made, the creatures that keep us alive. Help us to take what we've learned, not just from this evening, but from this whole day, and internalize it and share it with others so that we can be part of the witnessing force that will help to hasten your second coming. We all want that day to come very soon, and thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of that. In Jesus' name, amen.